So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. And I'd like to say thank you to Justin Ezell, the Director of Public Works from the City of Concord, joining us to discuss Measure V a little bit more before that hits our ballots on November 3rd. So I'm going to turn it over to Justin and he'll take it away.
Hey everybody, nice to meet you. There's some familiar faces, so it's great to see you all again. I'd like to just do a quick disclaimer about the presentation that I'm about to give. I'm a public works guy, so I'm a maintenance guy. I'm not I'm not in the finance department within the city. I'm not an expert on tax measures or anything else. So I'm just here to provide some information and do my very best to answer any questions that you all have. Any questions that you do have that I can't answer for you, I'll make sure that I take those back to the team and then get the answers to Melissa so that she can share it with you. Share my screen with you. Can you give me access to that, Melissa?
Justin.
Thank you. All right, are you seeing the title slide there? Perfect, all right. So I'd like to just start off by saying that I'm not here to advocate a yes or no vote on Measure V. I'm just here to provide information to all of you. As you guys know, Concord currently has a half-cent tax measure. It's called Measure Q. It's set to sunset in 2025. That tax measure helped us sustain services as we made our way through the last recession, but we still have quite a bit of unmet funding needs. Those unmet needs prevents us from addressing critical maintenance, and particularly our roadways, but also our parks and other city facilities. The city completed a public process looking at this issue, and an overwhelming majority supported a new revenue measure. So staff took the recommendation for a new revenue measure to the City Council, and Council provided a unanimous vote to put a measure on the ballot this year. So if the measure does pass, it would extend and increase our sales tax from 1/2 cent to 1 cent. This is a locally controlled revenue source that stays in Concord and cannot be taken by the state. So this is not new information for you, but the city currently receives 1.5 cents for every dollar spent on a taxable item. The remainder of the revenue goes to the state, BART, and Contra Costa Transportation Authority. If voters extend and increase the existing Measure Q sales tax to 1 cent, Concord's new tax rate would be 9.25%. Concord would then receive 2 cents for every dollar spent on taxable items. Measure V would supersede Measure Q, and the new tax rate would become effective on April 1st, 2021. Melissa, I don't need to let anyone in, do I? Okay, thank you. Measure Q is the existing 1/2 cent local use and transaction tax, as I mentioned, sales tax. It was originally passed by Concord voters in 2010 in response to one of the worst recessions in our history. Although the city had to make cuts, eliminate dozens of positions and furloughed employees, the funds generated by Measure Q helped Concord preserve and maintain city services and programs and restore the emergency reserve. In 2011, though, the state eliminated redevelopment agencies in order to address their own budget issues, which further undermined the city's economic recovery. Between 1990 and 2019, the state has taken $114 million in locally generated revenue from Concord to address its own budget deficit. Concord's economy was slower to recover from those in neighboring cities during this last recession. So rather than cutting even more community services and programs, the City Council placed an extension to Measure Q on the ballot in 2014. Voters overwhelmingly approved that measure. Measure Q at a half-cent rate currently generates $12 to $13 million per year for Concord, and it's currently set to expire in March 2025. Council has been working continuously over the last decade to create fiscal stability and prioritize city services. In 2018, a consultant working for the city determined that the city would be facing a structural deficit of $33 million per year by fiscal year 2026-2027. Although the city just went through an annual budget process and cut the current operating budget by $10 million, the impact of COVID has been pretty devastating on our economy. And the city is now facing a $45 million structural deficit by fiscal year 2027-2028. To address the growing need for general fund revenue, the idea of extending and increasing the existing half-cent sales tax to 1 cent was first proposed and considered in 2018. City Council at the time declined to put it on the November ballot back in 2018 and directed staff to perform extensive community outreach. The purpose of the outreach was to inform the public about the city's financial challenges. City staff also sought feedback and community priorities and tried to get a sense of the community's desire to address the budget challenges by enhancing locally controlled revenue sources. Prior to COVID, the city was already facing an uphill financial battle. According to the League of California Cities, cities throughout the state are expected to lose $7 billion as a result of the economic impact of COVID. Concord's fiscal situation has become more challenging as a result of the shelter-in-place orders and resulting business closures. Concord relies heavily on sales tax revenue. In fact, 33% of the city's general fund revenue comes from sales tax, while 7% is generated from the existing Measure Q. As a result of the pandemic, the city expects to experience a $13 million to $24 million loss in general fund revenue. That's for this current fiscal year. On June 23rd, our City Council adopted budget amendments to offset some of the losses. So as I mentioned, it included cutting more than $10 million from the current year budget. We eliminated 36 positions. We furloughed management and executive staff. We did some restructuring, and we reduced operating expenses and general fund subsidies. So cuts to services include less ability to address blight in the city, a diminished capacity for proactive violent crime and gang activity reduction, a diminished capacity to respond to neighborhood and quality of life issues, complaints, community engagement, crime prevention, decreased traffic enforcement, and a diminished capacity for proactive problem solving from our patrol officers. So as I mentioned before, Concord will be facing a $45 million per year structural deficit by fiscal year 2027-2028 if Measure Q expires in 2025 and the city does not generate any new revenues. Without additional revenues within the next 2 years, city services will need to be further reduced in order to maintain a minimum reserve, and no general fund money would be available for roadway maintenance. The city's general fund reserve is currently projected to be at 20% at the end of this fiscal year, and the city is projected to run out of reserves completely by the end of 2024-2025 as Measure Q expires at the end of March 2025. City staff have made a concerted effort to inform residents and businesses about our ongoing financial challenges. We've hosted multiple community meetings last fall. In mid-April, which was about 5 weeks into the shelter-in-place order, we commissioned an independent professional survey to seek the community's priorities. The vast majority of respondents indicated their support for extending and increasing the existing half-cent tax to 1 cent. So now city staff are conducting additional outreach to inform the greater Concord community about the results of the engagement and community identified priorities, and to answer questions about Measure B. So among the top priorities that we learned from our community when we did the polling in April is maintaining the 911 emergency response and disaster preparedness, supporting local businesses and jobs through the recovery, enhancing local street and pothole repair, maintaining community-based neighborhood patrols, addressing homelessness, and maintaining gang prevention and crime investigation. Since 2011, Concord has invested tens of millions of Measure Q dollars into road repairs. Measure Q has not been able to provide all of the necessary funds required to repair our local roads, some of which have not had major repair work done in 20 years. Roads, if you're not familiar with PCI, they have a rating of 0 to 100, 100 being a brand new street or excellent condition, and being lower than 55 of a PCI, pavement condition index, is considered poor. In a presentation to our city council last February, we shared that the pavement condition index for Concord has fallen to a 59, putting our roads in the at-risk category. Even though we invest $6 million per year in repairing our roadways, we should be investing $26 million to maintain the current condition. That's not to improve our roadways, that's just to keep them in the condition that they're currently in at a 59 PCI. So the problem is compounding, because the worse our roads get, the more expensive they are to repair. Measure B will not only help Concord continue to improve our aging streets and roads, this work will support job creation in our community. Concord residents have indicated that their top priority is keeping Concord safe, and Measure B will help maintain these important police services. Now, like many cities, homelessness has been a growing concern in Concord and our region. I know we all see it out there every day. I live here in Concord, and I see it when I'm out with my family and I'm conducting business. Especially with the pandemic continuing, Measure B funding will help speed up efforts to compassionately address homelessness with connections to mental health and housing services, while keeping our neighborhoods and public spaces safe and clean for residents, and keeping our communities stable and secure. Because this measure does not legally restrict use of the tax revenues to any specific purpose, it's a general tax. Measure B will maintain local control and fiscal accountability. It continues to require independent citizens' oversight, and spending priorities are based on community input. Measure B will continue to be spent locally, and no funding can be taken by the state. If Measure B is not passed, Measure Q will expire in March of 2025, and when it does, Concord will no longer receive $13 million annually. The city's reserves will be depleted by fiscal year 24-25. The impact would result in vital city services being further reduced or eliminated altogether. The goal of Measure B is to protect and maintain city services, including those important police services that I mentioned before, and addressing homelessness, as well as our local roads. The city set up a web page where additional information can be obtained. It's at cityofconcord.org/measure V. And in terms of next steps, the city and staff cannot take an official position on Measure B, like I mentioned before. So we're simply out educating as many folks who want to hear about Measure B, what it is and how the funds would be spent. If you'd like staff to make another presentation like this to an organization you belong to, you can please let us know. We're very happy to do that. You can visit the website for more information, or you could email any city staff member that you know, and we'll get more information to you. And that's the end of the presentation. I'm very happy to answer questions for you. Yes, Kevin?
I have one. Thanks for that presentation. I sat on some of those meetings when they were talking about Q going away, and so that's a lot of interesting information. On the bullets, it says support small business through recovery. Can you be more specific on that? Is that helping people expedite the planning or rezoning? Does it involve things like that, or help reface their buildings? I mean, I just don't, my job is to figure out what that means, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, Kevin, as you know, we have economic development staff here with the city. And those staff are here to do exactly that, to work with our business community, help folks through the recovery process, help continue conducting business through the shelter-in-place order. So there will be that kind of assistance. In terms of additional assistance beyond that, that's probably a question that I'll need to get back to you on, Kevin. Whether it's, you know, if it's anything beyond staff assisting businesses and working through the issues related to the shelter-in-place order, whether it's identifying properties, assisting with zoning, as you just mentioned. I'm more than happy to get more information about that to you.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. And then I have one more question, if no one else, I don't mean to jump the gun, but so let's just say in 2025, Q goes away. I mean, it's supposed to go away in 2025. I think that's when it's supposed to happen. But can it continue on? I mean, sometimes when I hear these presentations, it sounds like it may stick around. But if it's going away for sure, does Measure V kick in 2025, or will it kick in earlier? And if it kicks in at 2025, will there be another opportunity to vote on this measure, do you think, or do you know?
So if the ballot measure passes, if Measure V passes in November, what will happen is it will supersede Measure Q. So Measure Q will go away. And then Measure V will be in its place. And there is currently no sunset as the measure is written. And if it passes, there will be no sunset. So it will end by Concord voters. If the measure does not pass, Measure Q will continue until March of 2025, unless on a future ballot in 2022, Concord voters decide to do something with Measure Q, extend it, or do something else with it. So as it currently stands, if Measure V passes, it replaces Measure Q goes away, and Measure V is in its place.
And state of California can't touch Measure V money, but they still could dip into Measure Q right now as it stands.
Well, I don't believe that is the case. That's another locally controlled sales tax. I'll just confirm that, but I don't believe that the state can dip into Measure Q, no. I'll confirm that with you.
Yeah, but didn't they take 114 million of it already?
So the $114 million is a cumulative amount from 1990 to present, and includes funds like redevelopment agency funds and other things. Car registration fees. So it was a cumulative amount and wasn't tied to Measure Q, no.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for answering my questions. Great presentation.
Any other questions? Lee?
Yeah, I just had, Justin, I don't expect you to know this, but all these numbers are based on projected revenues for the coming years. And one of the things that's very tough is, given the revenues now, I'm sure they've dropped due to COVID and reduced business in the city of Concord. And I'm curious on, is there some information source that we could find out what formula they use to project revenue for the next 10 years? I mean, is it based on today's revenue this year? Or did they go back a couple of years pre-COVID and then put in percentages? Or because that's kind of what drives all these numbers. We're going to be short. We're going to have excess, whatever.
Right.
I didn't know if there's a source that could help me understand that part of it.
Yeah, I wish I could answer that for you right now, Lee, but that's certainly something I'll get back to you on.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hey, Justin, this is Ken Mintz.
Hi, Ken.
Hi. Hey, just a quick question. So it sounds like the decision was made on moving forward with this before the county moved forward with Measure X. Was there any, or is there any concern from the city perspective of, if both of these passes, it will make it one of the higher sales taxes in the county from an economic development standpoint, and what the impact might be there?
Yeah, certainly that's something that we're thinking about, Ken. You know, really this is up to Concord voters to decide. In terms of Measure X, of course, it's up to our county voters to decide. I was out for a walk the other night with the family, and one of my neighbors asked me whether he should vote for Measure X or Measure V. And you know, my response, of course, was that I didn't have an opinion, and that's still my response. Yes, it will raise our sales tax to 9.25 if Measure V passes, 9.75 if both pass, both Measure X and Measure V. But that won't put Concord at the highest tax rate in the county. There are other agencies that I believe are as high as 10.25%. So certainly not unheard of getting into that higher tax bracket. That's the best I can answer for you on that one, Ken.
Okay, just one other quick question then. Are the funds that come out of Measure Q today and V later, are they directed towards the different services, or they go into the general fund, and this is the way that the current council wishes to allocate those funds?
Yeah, so the tax is a general tax, so it won't be going to any specific purpose. The city staff and council have been working with the community all throughout the Measure Q process, and will continue if Measure V passes, in terms of priorities and where the community wants to see that money spent, whether it's on roadways or police services or homelessness, or you know, a combination of a number of different things, including economic development. So the positive is that it's not a tax that can just go towards roadways or some other service that the city provides. It'll be up to the community on how we spend those dollars if it does pass.
Okay, thanks.
I think Brian has a question.
Yeah, Justin, as a general tax, a tax the collections from which go in to the city's general fund, doesn't that actually make it susceptible to the state coming in and sweeping some, or even, God forbid, all of it, if they enact another local tax collection measure?
Yeah, Brian, this is not my area of expertise, but I'll certainly follow up with Melissa on how it is that the state cannot touch this the revenues from this tax measure. My understanding, and I wish I could explain it better to you, Brian, is that in no way can the state touch these dollars if the measure does pass. And I'll be sure to follow up quickly with you all on why that is. I'll get the information to Melissa by tomorrow for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you explain a little bit how the citizen oversight works? Is that an elected board or something the city council appoints?
Yeah, it's a committee appointed by the city council. I want to say it's made up of, roughly 5 members of the community. I don't remember exactly how many committee members there are, but they're all appointed by the city council. And the committee meets on a regular basis and reviews city spending and how we're spending those Measure Q funds. They're very much involved in the budgeting process. Again, it's a citizens oversight committee. And so they'll even come to the city council and report out on their findings and recommendations for the city council. And the committee, by the way, has supported all the work that the city has done through Measure Q, how those funds were being used. And it's been, I believe, a really good process for both city and the community having that citizens oversight committee in place.
So would it be the same committee that would carry over from Q to V, or would there be a new committee elected or appointed?
That's a good question. I'll find out the answer to that one too for you, Kaylin.
Any other questions? No? Well, thank you, Justin. We appreciate you coming on, and for you then following up with some of these answers as well. I'll be sure to send out the answers to everyone's questions once I get them from Justin.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure and nice seeing a lot of you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Justin.
Thanks, Justin. That was perfect.
I see Colleen is on. Colleen, do you have any updates you want to provide from the county if you're still there?
I'm still here. Hello, everyone. Colleen Awad with Supervisor Karen Mitchoff's office. Right now, we are still currently in the red tier. Our health officer this morning, I'll just provide a quick brief update, was expecting us to have actually met the criteria for the orange tier, which is the next least restrictive tier. So we have to hold that criteria for 2 weeks before the state will move us. And so our indicators have been good, and we've been continuing to see our numbers continue to go down. And so the health officer was optimistic that we would be hitting those criteria about a week from today. So just wanted to kind of give everyone that little tidbit of good news. And then, as always, all updates regarding our coronavirus health orders, as well as tips for celebrating Halloween and what have you during this unusual time, is all at coronavirus.cchealth.org.
Thank you, Colleen. Does anyone have any questions for Colleen real quick? No? All right.
I have one super quick one, Colleen. I'm sorry. This came up just the other day in a conversation. So offices are still in the same tier as they've kind of been for a while now. Like, you have to stay within 6 feet. You can't have like board meetings and things like that. That's still correct, right?
Mm-hmm. It is.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I kind of poked around and I didn't see it. So thank you. I didn't spend a ton of time, but thank you very much.
Well, and I'm also happy to share with the chamber, there is kind of a spreadsheet that shows what's open and which tiers. Unfortunately, there is still some businesses and some activities that have not been assigned a tier yet, but I'm happy to forward that spreadsheet so that the chamber can just have it as a resource. And anytime anyone has any questions, you can always send them my way.
That would be great. We'd love that.
Colleen, can you forward that to me as well?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, with no other questions, we're going to get you guys out a little bit early. Thanks for joining us, and we would like to say thank you again to Justin for presenting and Colleen then for sharing that update.
Thank you.